We're happy that you're doing another one here with us. And I just want to, flag for our audience, we're going to try to get to as many questions from you guys as possible. So I'll be, pausing in between my questions to just see if there are any hands in the room or any hands virtually. So start thinking of those. But for now, Mark and I have a lot to discuss. So let's get right to what I think is on a lot of people's minds, which is how do you take advantage of this forgiveness opportunity if you're eligible?
Well, the first thing is you need to update your contact information, both with the loan servicer and on studentaid.gov, so that you can get information about the application when it becomes available. I would also suggest that if you were making payments on your loans during the payment pause and interest waiver when you weren't required to do so, you may want to ask for a refund. You contact the loan servicer and ask for the refund if your loan balance is less than the $10,000 or $20,000 threshold. If your loans were in the FFEL program and not owned or held by the U.S. Department of Education, then to qualify for forgiveness, you're going to need to obtain a federal direct consolidation loan to move those loans into the direct loan program.
Great. Yeah, so that's, those are a lot of important steps that that people should be taking. And if you go on the Department of Education's website, there's some more info about that. But we'll keep it to Mark's points, who can really help you take advantage. So one thing that we've been hearing a lot about is possible challenges to this debt forgiveness, and that there's been some reporting recently that a lot of groups of opponents to the president's plan are preparing to challenge it once the application form comes out. Mark, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, sort of what is the outlook for those legal challenges?
Well, if they make it to federal court or U.S. Supreme Court, the loan forgiveness is likely to be blocked. At the very least, it would be delayed. And that's because Congress doesn't hide elephants in mouse holes, in the word of a 2001 U.S. Supreme Court decision. There's something called the major questions doctrine, where if it's a piece of policy that has significant political or economic impacts, Congress has to have explicitly authorized the program. It can't just be by implication. And they're relying on the HEROES Act of 2003 as justification for the legal authority to do this, but it doesn't quite fit that. The HEROES Act of 2003 is for events where an affected individual, which is defined as someone who has experienced direct economic harm as a direct consequence of the national emergency, well, they haven't necessarily really done that, and the authority doesn't quite extend towards forgiving these student loans. It's an expansive interpretation. So the real problem, though, is, the Republicans who oppose it may not have legal standing to file a lawsuit to block it. If they don't have legal standing, they can't do it, and so the loan forgiveness plan will go into effect. Several parties that you might think would be harmed by this provision don't actually have legal standing. So taxpayers, they're paying for this. Well, there was a Supreme Court ruling, Hine versus the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which found that taxpayers do not have standing to file suit against federal government. Borrowers who don't qualify, well, the Higher Education Act doesn't provide a private right of action for these borrowers. And the fact that you didn't get forgiveness doesn't mean you were actually harmed. The loan servicers in the direct loan program, they aren't going to be servicing as many borrowers, but their contracts with the U.S. Department of Education do not provide for a specific level of borrowers to service, except for some of the nonprofit loan servicers for whom the law actually provides for 100,000 borrowers, and that certainly could be satisfied by the U.S. Department of Education. So the FFEL lenders, the commercially held federal loans, they're going to be affected because borrowers will refinance their loans into direct loans to qualify for the forgiveness. But there have been other loan forgiveness programs like public service loan forgiveness that have had the exact same impact, and they haven't been able to sue over that. Finally, members of Congress might be able to bring lawsuits.
Yeah, right. So sort of a mixed bag, right? If the lawsuit, makes it through the courts, likely to be struck down, but, sort of hard to find people who actually qualify to bring a lawsuit.
Yes.
So definitely a mixed bag. Okay, but let's talk about other possible obstacles, that borrowers maybe should brace themselves for as this debt relief plan rolls out. What should they be preparing for as they watch it come through?
Okay, so for about 8 million borrowers, the forgiveness will be automatic because U.S. Department of Education already has their income information. For the other borrowers, they'll need to file an application, which should come out in early October. It's probably going to be a simple attestation that their income falls below the thresholds. There may be confusion. There may be a lot of borrowers calling their loan servicers with questions. So the call centers, they've added staff and they've extended their hours, but nevertheless, some people will be on infinite hold while waiting to talk to someone.
Yeah, definitely. I know when this, debt relief announcement first came through, servicers were telling me to tell our readers not to call in because they were feeling overwhelmed.
And the studentaid.gov website recently, after the president's announcement, it almost crashed and it slowed down, and they had to take certain services offline to preserve the ability to answer people's questions.
Right. Yes. It's back now, and I guess we'll have to watch what happens when they release that form in early October. So I'm going to just take a quick pause to see if there are any questions, either virtually or in the room. Anyone? Okay. If not, we will continue. Mark and I really could discuss this for quite some time, so don't worry. Okay, so, along with the cancellation, the Biden administration announced that they would be continuing the pause on interest payments and collections that's been in place, since COVID started, and they talked about it as a final pause. We've heard, I've heard many officials describe it as such. Do you think it is really final?
Well, the administration has cried wolf at least once before. The 5th extension to the payment pause was described as the final extension, and now this is the 7th one. Maybe it'll be the final one but I can foresee that if the Republicans succeed in filing a lawsuit that causes delays, they'll do another extension. And if some catastrophic event unrelated to all this occurs, like the start of the zombie apocalypse, then they might do another extension.
Right. And so how should borrowers be preparing for student loan payments to resume, theoretically at the end of the year, at the start of the new year, or just at some point in the future?
Well, they should first do a descriptive budgeting exercise where they track their spending for a month so that they know where they are going to be able to find the money to make the loan payments. If they are unable to make loan payments because they're still experiencing economic distress, maybe they don't have a job, then there are going to be options. There's the economic hardship deferment, unemployment deferment, general forbearances, and income-driven repayment plans. They should probably contact their loan servicers now to find out about these options and explore which one is best for them.
Yeah, and speaking of income-driven repayment plans, I know John mentioned when he was introducing us, one component of the president's announcement that maybe got a little bit less play than the other two was that they would be, sort of dramatically reforming one of the repayment plans. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that might look like for borrowers, and how they should consider it as they prepare for repayment to resume.
So we have from the announcement that it will cut the monthly payments under income-driven repayment in half for undergraduate borrowers, not for graduate borrowers, slight reduction for graduate borrowers. And if a borrower's loan balance was $12,000 or less when they entered income-driven repayment, their remaining debt will be forgiven after 10 years. Otherwise, it's after 20 years. So this significantly reduces the cost of the loans to the borrowers, and some borrowers will be better off doing this than some other form of loan repayment plan.
Right, and we don't know much, right, beyond, sort of what has been released to the press, right? There's still some details to sort out.
Right, so the process is going to be by setting new regulations. So there needs to be a notice of proposed rulemaking published in the Federal Register that would have all the details. We don't have that yet, but I anticipate we'll have it soon. So long as the final rule, and there'll be a public comment period, probably 30 days, then there'll be a final rule published. If that final rule is published by November 1st, this new income-driven repayment plan will go into effect on July 1st.
Got it. So, right, so borrowers interested in taking advantage of it, there will still be a few month lag in between, theoretically, in between when payments resume and when borrowers can get on that plan.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, great. All right. Pausing again. Oh, we have a question from the virtual audience.
We have two questions.
Great.
First one, if my loan is through Sallie Mae, does that qualify for the loan forgiveness? This is from Kay Lipsky.
Right. So Sallie Mae has two types of federal loans, or had two types of federal loans. They had loans that were in the direct loan program where they were the servicer, now Navient, and they also had federal family education loans that were ones that they had made themselves and still held, and then they also have private student loans. So loans that are in the direct loan program qualify. Loans in the FFEL program that are held by or on behalf of the U.S. Department of Education qualify. Commercially held FFEL loans do not directly qualify, but can be consolidated into the direct loan program to qualify. And then private student loans, such as the loans that Sallie Mae is making right now, do not qualify.
And can you just, I know we have another question for the virtual audience. Before we get to that, can you just tell people how do you check to see what kind of loan you have?
Well, if your loans were eligible for the payment pause and interest waiver, then they qualify for forgiveness.
Great. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, and another one from...
Question number 2. What are the best places to search for funding, non-loan, for college? This is from John.
Right, so to pay for college, there's money from the government, federal government, state government, the colleges themselves, and private entities like private scholarship programs. To apply for money from the federal government, the state government, and most colleges and universities, you file the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA form. To find scholarships, you search free scholarship matching websites like fastweb.com, the College Board's Big Future, and that will match your background profile to a database of scholarships, and then it's up to you to apply for those scholarships. There are also education tax breaks like the American Opportunity Tax Credit, student loan interest deduction, and then there's also student loan repayment assistance programs that many employers offer.
Great, and I see, okay, over there.
Hi, I'm Ricky DeMello. So I have a question about taxes for both of you. So student loan forgiveness currently has, when forgiven, the income tax that's applied to it is paused currently. Do you think that that will be continued at some point? It goes until 2025, if I'm correct, but so there's that. Secondly, what are your thoughts on the state taxes of the federal student loan forgiveness?
Right, so the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 provided that any forgiveness that occurs through December 31st of 2025 is tax-free. Most other forms of student loan forgiveness were already tax-free. The main impact of this was in case the president decided to forgive student loans, it would apply to that, as well as income-driven repayment plans forgive the remaining debt after 20 or 25 years in repayment. President Biden has called for it to be extended or made permanent. It seems likely that that will occur because it's at the intersection of policy objectives of both Democrats and Republicans. Democrats like money for higher education, Republicans like tax cuts. It's the combination of the two.
And then I think he also had a question about state taxes. What are the state tax implications for debt forgiveness?
Right, so the student loan forgiveness is tax-free on on your federal income tax return. And it's not an ongoing issue because once your loans are forgiven, it's at that point in time, the forgiveness, the tax impact would occur. And normally when you have debt canceled, it's as though someone gave you money to pay off the debt. And that money is treated normally by the IRS as income. In the case of the president's student loan forgiveness, that will not occur. But there are many states that do not conform to the federal definition of adjusted gross income or taxable income. There are about 18 of these states where the loan forgiveness will potentially be taxable on your state income tax return. Now, the cost of this taxes ranges from 3% to 13% depending on the state. But it works out to be the equivalent of just a few months of loan payments. So would you rather have $10,000 forgiven or have at most $1,000 in taxes? And you could avoid the forgiveness and not file the application form and thereby avoid paying $1,000 in taxes.
Right, okay. I think I saw, okay, over in the third or fourth row over there. Yes. And say your name and.
Okay, my name is Lindsay. Does it matter, do you have to make any payments yet for the loan in order to qualify for the forgiveness?
I didn't hear part of the question.
Do you have to have
Made a
payment on the loan in order for it to qualify for
No,
forgiveness?
in fact, students who are still in school are eligible. Only loans that were made first dispersed before June 30th of 2022 are eligible. If you get a consolidation loan, that can be after June 30th, but the loans that are consolidated have to have all been dispersed before June 30th. Now, if you're a dependent student who's in school, who's getting this loan forgiveness, the income will be your parents' income. If you're an independent student, like a graduate student, it'll be your own income. If you're no longer in college, it'll be your own income.
Right, and yeah, and just for dependent student is, sort of what we often think of when people are going to college. They leave their parents' home to attend college at 18. Okay, I think John virtual audience had a question.
Are there any particular implications that make loan forgiveness more difficult for certain groups of people?
Well, if you're not qualifying for it automatically, you have to file an application form. And it may be a simple application form, but just asking borrowers to file an application form causes some borrowers to not apply, especially low-income students and underrepresented students. That was one of the objections to it, but the president wanted this to not be available to the top 5% of earners nationwide, so we had to do some means testing as part of this program.
Right, and I think we have a question from Mark.
I asked this half jokingly, but what's to stop, in moving away from the forgiveness pieces, but what's to stop someone from filing for emancipation as a minor at 16 and applying for loans in that way?
Yeah,
What's to stop somebody from, I guess from applying for loans, filing for emancipation from their parents and applying for loans as an independent student, right? And
as almost a family plan, right? So what's to stop me from encouraging my kid to, file for emancipation so that they can apply for loans? So the assumption is that they would get better loans because they're not getting income from the family.
Okay,
from
so
the parents.
A dependent student, there's a specific definition that involves 13 questions, like are you over age 24 as of December 31st of the academic year? Are you married? Do you have dependents other than a spouse? Are you a veteran? Are you an orphan? And very few of these are under your discretionary control, so you really can't manipulate yourself into being an independent student so that your parents' income isn't involved. Also, this is based on what your status was when you got these loans as of June 30th, 2022. So if you change it now, it's not going to affect whether you were a dependent student then.
Can you do it before?
Well, June 30th, 2022 was in the past.
Is it a strategy you can employ before, like as a precursor to actually applying for college.
Yeah, like unrelated to
is-
debt forgiveness. Could you?
This is not about forgiveness. This is more about, is this a strategy that someone can actually employ? You're about to go to college, and instead of taking out a loan as a member of the family, as dependent to your parents, can you file emancipation and then apply for loans?
You could.
This is not withstanding the ethics of it, of course.
Right. So you could get married, you could have children or other dependents, and therefore become an independent student. But usually, the difference in aid eligibility isn't all that much. And in most cases, there was a nice series of stories by Jody Cohen of ProPublica about sham legal guardianships. There's now a lot more scrutiny when someone is placed into a court-ordered legal guardianship to make sure that they really are genuinely independent of their parents.
Yeah, and I think that is all the time we have. But thank you, Mark, so much for sharing your expertise, and thanks everybody for all of your great questions.
Thank you.